If you want to know how to sub, when to sub, and why the sub, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Pitwall, your stop for fantasy Formula One content. Like and subscribe for more content like this. I'm Jay Jack, and let's go. First thing is to understand the makeup of your team. Each team consists of 5 drivers and 1 constructor. Since there are 10 constructors, you will only be picking 1. Since there are 20 drivers, you're picking 1/4 of all the drivers. And when the qualifying session starts for a race weekend, your team gets locked in and you cannot change them until the Monday after the race, and they become available for subbing out your drivers. To understand subbing, you get 3 free subs every single what they call race week, or in our case, it can be 2 weeks, 3 weeks in between races. So in between races for this video is what they are referring to as race week. You get 3 subs. A sub is whenever you click manage on your team, you drop a driver, you pick a new driver, and you hit save. However many slots that you change, that counts as a substitution, but only after you've hit save. Let's say you want to make more than 3 substitutions. Well, you are allowed to have up to 6 substitutions, but the last 3 substitutions will cost you 10 points each. So if you make 3 substitutions, then you decide to make 3 more, you're going to start the race down 30 points. Let's say though you want to make more than 6 substitutions. Well, I would recommend to you using a wild card. That gives you 12 free substitutions until that race locks for the qualifying session. You get 2 wild cards per season, 1 in the first half and 1 in the second half. But why would you want to get a driver? Perhaps you want to grow your budget. Drivers can increase in value, and we'll get back to that in more detail. But perhaps the greatest reason why people would want to change or sub the drivers is they want a better driver. You did not like how your driver performed, you want a better one for next race, so you're picking up that driver for that reason. Let us understand though that your team, all 6 slots, has what is called value. You can hit this icon here that's got the 3 lines and the 3 dots, and it'll pop up and it'll tell you your total team value. For my team 1, it's valued at 100.7 million. My second team is valued at 100.9 million. And if you hit the info, it just reminds you that your team value plus your remaining budget is what your team is valued at. A little bit of analysis between my 2 teams, you'll notice that the remaining budget was 0.3 million for team 1. That meant before race 1 started, I had used as much of my budget as possible with as little wiggle room left. The second team, I tried a different approach and I had 1.2 million left over. But notice, team 2 is valued higher at 100.9 million than team 1. And how do we know that that second team was able to gain such improvements? Well, we'll see how much did they gain in value. Verstappen, 0.3 million. Norris, 0.3 million. Both teams have these 2 drivers. Perez doesn't go up. Giovinazzi doesn't go up. Russell doesn't go up. Gasly doesn't go up. Schumacher doesn't change. But Tsunoda got $500,000 in his value. Red Bull went up 0.1, but Mercedes went down 0.2. So having a driver that goes up in value is going to help your overall team value. So we talked about why you might want to substitute a driver, but let's talk about when you would want to substitute a driver. You're going to want to substitute a driver before they gain or lose value. How do you know when they're going to gain or lose value? You have these sentiment meters. So notice at 68% sentiment. Let's look at Giovinazzi. He's at 83% sentiment. So perhaps by this next race, he will have dropped by 0.1 million, and you're not wanting to lose that. You could change out Giovinazzi for somebody else, like Schumacher or Gasly, so that you are able to have not a loss in their value. But you might also want to sub in a driver right before they gain value. Perhaps you figured that Tsunoda was going to go up a lot of money value after last race. Well, you'd want to pick him up right as soon as the last race ended so that you get that upswing in the value. Because if you pick him up right now, you're spending $500,000 more than you would have at the beginning of the last race weekend. You want to recognize that you might want to sub out a driver so you can maintain a higher team value. Your team maxes out at 100 million, but if their value value goes over that 100 million, it will raise your cap. And if you sub out, for example, one of these drivers, your cap will still stay at that. So you could potentially be able to afford more expensive drivers as the season progresses if you maintain your cap above 100 million. So we've talked about why you would want to substitute a driver. We've talked about when you would want to substitute a driver. Before we get into the tips side of things, let us understand dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is when the driver goes up or down in value. It changes after race based off their performance, but in between races, or what they're calling the race week, it is based off of the percentage picked by all the drivers and how they're traded in and out. This is called the summary page, and this is very important to check out because this is not available normally when you are managing your team. Here in most transferred in, we'll show you the most transferred in drivers since last race and the most transferred out. It is no surprise that Yuki Tsunoda would raise by 500,000 when 16% of teams are transferring him in, followed by Lando Norris, Leclerc, Gasly, Perez. It is also no wonder that Vettel, Ricciardo have dropped the most when everyone seems to be getting rid of them. So what you would want to keep in mind, and we're going to go into dynamic pricing in another video more in depth, but what you want to keep in mind for subbing is that the driver that seems to be getting the most transfers in, you want to get him on your team before everyone else does. That way you can ride the wave of value as they increase. Conversely, if a driver seems to be dipping by everybody, you want to be one of the first to get rid of him, or perhaps one of the last right before his value goes down. And to understand dynamic pricing and sentiment values, I have made from scratch a Google Sheet. You can find it in the link in the description on any of our podcasts where we look at it in a routine manner. It is important to understand the numbers for individuals who do what I'm going to term day trading. I normally will pick a team and then not try to change the team much unless I feel like a driver is not performing. That way I can play the averages game. But with dynamic pricing, there are people who are going to want to get the upswing so that they can continue to improve their team as the season progresses. For those people who are into that sort of day trading, let's look at Tsunoda, for example. Last race, he had 8.8 million as his cost. He's raised by 500,000, and now he is at 9.3 million. And you can see that he's got a 71% sentiment. He is still on the rise and is likely to go up by another 0.1 million for the next race. And you can see here the little spark line humps as he's been raising. Here over to the right, the points per million, it is very good. He's on the green side of things, that you are spending wisely. You're getting 1.72 points per million that is given toward him, and his value is 2.4%. That means you're actually getting 2.4% more points than you would be getting if he were to even out. Now, of course, it's just one race. This will change as the season progresses. But the last thing, like I said, for dynamic pricing during the race weeks or in between races is based off of percentage pick. He's at 33%. One in every 3 teams has him, and it's been steadily increasing since last race. That's another reason for his value to go up. But let's look at someone like Norris. He's raised by 0.3 million. He's at 30% sentiment. He's got a 2.16 points per million. He's got a value of 5.6%, which is greater than anyone else. Over half the teams by all players have him, and he's been increasing in his picks since last race. So this is another reason why checking drivers transfers in, transfers out, and seeing how their prices are likely to go up. Last tip that you should be aware of is if you want to day trade, that means you're going to check the sentiments, the price values every single day or at least a couple times a week in between races. You want to keep this always in the back of your mind. Every slot that is changed counts as a sub. So for example, you had Gasly. Yuki Tsunoda did really good. You pick him up right as the race ends. That's one sub. Then you wait for Tsunoda's price to go up by 500,000 and you want to now change him back for somebody else who's maybe a little bit more expensive or who you think is going to get more points. That's a second sub for the same slot. So that means if you wanted to do something similar with a second driver, you're going to have to pay 10 points because you can really, with 3 subs, only do a day trading with 1 slot position if you're going to trade out and then trade back in. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to do the day trading, recognize that you're going to have to balance between 1 slot. If you're doing 2 slots, then you're really going to have to be careful with who you're picking up. So this is what I want to leave you with. Pick a driver who you think will score. If they score, their value will go up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Pitwall.